other heads of European countries and, of course, the European Commission. It's been a funny day. He has got an agreement. And what we've seen published are the legal texts today. Boris Johnson describes this as a great new deal. And I'm going to take issue with all three of those words, and then you tell me whether you think I'm right or not. I don't think it's great at all. It is slightly better in some places than Theresa May's appalling sellout was. So I think now I'll promote it to the second worst deal in history from the worst. But great it is not. And actually in very large areas, including even foreign policy, it's going to leave us very, very tied. New, are you having a laugh, Prime Minister? The withdrawal agreement is 95% the same. Yes, there are some big changes in Ireland. The backstop has gone. Oddly, we're actually back to the EU's original plan should be kept in this. It was Theresa May who said we couldn't separate out one part of the country from another. And the third word is deal. And it's not a deal. It is an international treaty binding in law. So I'm not massively impressed with it. In fact, I would say this is not Brexit. I see it as some kind of surrender. But Boris saying there that it'll get Brexit done, as if, I tell you what, if Parliament votes for this on Saturday and the European Parliament votes for this next Tuesday, there'll be no more debate about Brexit. Well, let me tell you, even if this does go through, this is not the end of Brexit negotiations. It's the beginning of Brexit negotiations, because the attempt to move on to a new free trade agreement is going to be met with some real problems. Whilst the EU's insistence that the UK stays part of the customs union has gone, Mr. Barnier made a pretty extraordinary speech about the fact there will not be a free trade agreement unless there is a level playing field. And that means unless we are aligned, perfectly aligned in terms of laws on employment, laws on the environment, and even, unbelievably, taxation. It extends also to state aid rules. So if, for example, we decided we wanted to keep the Scunthorpe Steelworks open, we wouldn't be allowed to, unless the European Commission told us that was the case. Oh, and fishing, that's gone. That's gone. We have literally today surrendered any idea that we will take back our territorial waters. So to get to a free trade agreement, we're going to have to make huge democratic sacrifices. You see, the argument we're taking back control of our laws, our money and our borders doesn't work if we stay in regulatory alignment, because we will basically have to accept all new EU laws and rules, over which, of course, we will now have, if we've technically left the European Union, have no say whatsoever. So, look, I think it's absolutely awful. I'm pretty depressed about what's been agreed today. It certainly isn't Brexit. But there was a really very, very interesting Jean-Claude Juncker moment this afternoon. Jean-Claude Juncker was asked about, well, what if this doesn't pass? Would there be an extension? Let's listen to what he had to say.
He and myself, we don't think that it's possible to give another prorogation. There will be no other prorogation. I'm speaking.
I'm sorry.
That's him shouting at Channel 4 News.
You are saying?
Are you going to rule out an extension?
That's what I was saying.
So you're actually going to say officially that you will rule out an extension?
Yes.
To Article 50?
We have a deal, so why should we have a prorogation?
But what if Parliament, UK Parliament votes against it?
I'm not in charge of Westminster.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, that's virtually gangsterism. I mean, here you have an unelected Luxembourger who heads up the European Commission making a decision there'll be no extension. Now, whether he's consulted with 27 other heads of state, I don't know. But effectively, he's kind of overruled if this line of argument continues, he's kind of overruled the Benn Act. Now, look, I don't like the Benn Act one little bit, but it is a law that was passed in a UK Parliament. Is this why Boris was so confident all along that we would be leaving on the 31st of October? Did he know that somehow, somewhere, they'd say there can be no extension? However, since that statement of Juncker's, I've been talking behind the scenes to a few people, and there is an exception they, of course, would make, and that is if Parliament passed for us to have a second referendum. If we were to have a referendum on this new treaty, then they would happily give us an extension so that we've got time to do it. I've given you my thoughts. I've given you my views. You tell me, is this Brexit? And if you think, yep, it means we will leave the EU, call 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you think, no, Boris says Brexit and then he keeps talking about deep and special partnerships. We're not really leaving most of it. In which case, text to 84850 and tell me, should your MP vote for or against this coming Saturday? Please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC, at LBC. And of course, you can watch us on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. We're live here in Brussels on what has been, I think we can say, quite a dramatic day, but from my point of view, a very bad day. Because are the great British public going to believe that it's a great new deal when, in my opinion, it's absolutely none of these things? Steve from Stroud says, if the EU likes it, then it can't be Brexit. Ian from Guildford says, I've been a great supporter, but surely we have to accept this deal. The longer it goes on, the stronger the Ramonas get. Well, let me tell you something, Ian. If this does go through, as I've said already, I think that'll be the beginning. That will be the beginning of years and years of acrimony. John on YouTube says, I'm disappointed with Nigel's anti-Boris attitude. No, I'm pro-Boris when he says we've got to leave, and he's happy to leave with no deal. He's leaving, John, with a treaty, a very bad treaty. Let's go to regular caller, Peter in Wimbledon, and a Remainer. Peter, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. Thank you for taking the call. Just one thing before I get to my point. You're going to have to stop, telling a bit of a, untruth, because Mr. Juncker makes no decision whether to grant extension or not. It's not up to him. It's up to 27 member states. So whatever he says is absolutely irrelevant. So now I'd like to get to
hang on a second,
main
Peter.
point.
Hang on a second. It's not irrelevant. He is the most senior official in the European Union, and he was giving a very, very definitive view. And I did say, Peter, I don't know whether he's consulted with the other leaders or not, but I did think it was potentially a significant moment.
Well, he won't be asked, to put it this way. He won't be asked. That's why his opinion is irrelevant, because he won't be asked to vote. There's 27 head of member states going to be voting on this, so that you know that, and you shouldn't be saying this.
Well, he is the most powerful, highly paid official in the European Union, Peter. His view is very important. Anyway, is this Brexit?
My main point, Nigel, I've been saying this since Theresa May came back with her deal, that for you Brexiteers, you have to kind of write it down, guys. It's either a deal or no Brexit. And the fact of the matter is, this country is never going to go for no-deal Brexit, because, as you know it yourself, no-deal Brexit is automatically guaranteed a border in Northern Ireland. At Good Friday, peace agreement will be jeopardized. As you know it yourself, regardless of what Mr. Trump has told you, if Good Friday peace agreement has been jeopardized, there will be no trade deal with the United States whatsoever. You can forget about it. So should we leave European Union without a deal, hoping that we're going to compensate this by the deal with the United States? Is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And Boris Johnson's Mr. Brexit, himself, managed to negotiate the deal, which is slightly a bit better than Theresa May's. But you should ask yourself, Nigel, is 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years negotiating, and all these Brexiteers in charge of the process managed to negotiate what they've negotiated, and you're telling us that you have better ideas.
Oh, absolutely, Peter. Yeah, and by the way, in the case of a clean break Brexit, both the Taoiseach and indeed Monsieur Barnier have said there will be no hard infrastructure on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Secondly, it would not contravene the Good Friday Agreement in any way at all. So there'd be no objections on that basis in the US Congress. And Peter, let's put it like this. Theresa May set us off on a disastrous path, and Boris decided, rather than scrapping it, to put lipstick on the pig. And that's what we're doing here. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, live from Brussels on the day of an agreement. It's 6:15, and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Agreement in Brussels, and the Prime Minister calls it a great new deal. I don't think it's any of those three words. What do you think? Is this Brexit? That's the simple question. Carol in Walthamstow says, doesn't sound like Brexit to me. David said, we've got to face the facts, Nigel. They will never allow no deal. So it's time to accept this deal as the best and only form of Brexit that we will ever get. Trouble is, David, if we're tied into regulatory alignment, if we haven't got back our fishing rights, if we're tied on foreign policy, we've even made a series of military commitments here, which I find extraordinary. I mean, Boris was right. Boris said if we signed up to this, we'd become a vassal state. And twice he voted against it. And now he's trying to sell it to the nation when it's 95% the same. I hope people haven't got too short of memories. David, I'm perfectly happy to compromise on things, but I just do not want a new EU treaty. Frankly, the way I'm feeling about it right now, I simply can't see the point of it. Luke on Facebook says, been saying for weeks that Boris had a cunning plan. That is a bad treaty which won't get through Parliament, so we leave on the 31st with no deal. Well, Luke, is this going to get through Parliament? And the DUP are not going to vote for this. So to get it through, Boris needs quite a lot of Labour MPs to vote for it. And it's been looking over the last few weeks with Stephen Kinnock very much as the leader that quite a few of them might vote for it because they represent big Labour Leave voting areas, and they were horrified by the results of the European elections back in May of this year. But Jeremy Corbyn appears to be getting a bit tougher with his parliamentary party. There's actually a bit of unity in the Labour Party on Brexit, which is something that we've not really said much of for the last 3 years. And they are going to be putting down, an amendment which says there has to be a second referendum on this. And I think there's sort of an implicit threat that if Labour MPs vote for Boris's treaty, they may well find themselves getting deselected. So I don't think he's got the numbers to get this through unless they really are spooked by Juncker and others. And will we leave on the 31st with no deal, Luke? I just don't believe it. Let's go to Matthew in Heathrow. Matthew, is this Brexit?
Yes, Nigel, I don't understand what's your problem. I mean, you've got now what you want. Are you getting, we could now leave. Are you actually getting cold feet about it now?
So we don't get back our fishing waters, okay?
Well, I mean, that's the next stage. So you could get onto the next stage. We can't take a free trade deal for granted.
But the next stage, and this is the point about today, what Barnier has done is to define the agony of the next stage by making it clear we will not have a free trade agreement unless fisheries are shared and unless we have regulatory alignment. And my point, Matthew, is this. If we have to have regulatory alignment on industrial policy, state aid rules, employment legislation, environmental legislation, we are not an independent, self-governing country. We're not making our own laws.
Yeah, but we don't. We don't have to have a free trade deal. I mean, because the Northern Ireland issue is solved with this deal. I mean, as we import more than we export, I mean, they'll end up paying us more money on WTO. So, I mean,
Matthew, I buy that argument. But the whole point of this treaty, the whole point of what Boris is doing, is to stop us going down a WTO route.
Well, I mean, that's the trade deal, and our backstop is, okay, if they don't give us, and I mean, we are going to get free trade on certain things. I mean, Northern Ireland, for certain now, is going to have free trade with Southern Ireland. But basically, I mean, this is the Brexit I thought you wanted. I mean, I was Remain accepted. We have to leave.
No, Matthew, this is not the Brexit I want at all. It's not Brexit to me. It's Brexit in name only. If it was Brexit... Well, if we can't make our own laws on employment, environmental law...
We can. We don't have to go for the free trade deal.
Well, that is the commitment. That is what Boris Johnson is asking. That is what Boris Johnson is asking Parliament to vote for. He's asking them to vote for a package that includes a commitment to work towards a free trade deal where Monsieur Barnier has already preset many of those lines of negotiation.
But it's going to be, that's the next stage, and the MPs will have to vote to agree what type of trade deal we're going to have, whether it will be a free trade deal, WTO, but it solves the Northern Ireland problem. So now you can get the Brexit. And I mean, I think, you should go behind this. Otherwise, there is a risk that it's going to go to the second referendum and you won't get the Brexit. And from my point of view, is we've invested so much money now in this Brexit. We got to make it work, and we can make it work.
And how many more years, Matthew? How many more years of arguments do you think there are going to be now?
We got one more year. If we're talking about the end of 2020, where it will either be a free trade deal or we start doing the customs import-export,
but they've already
makes more money out of it.
But they've already put a provision in the Select Committee extended to 2022.
Well,
this could go on. This could go on forever and ever.
But I believe the transition was only until the end of 2020.
No, they've already agreed it can go on until 2022. That's already been agreed. And look at Article 50, how that date slipped and slipped and slipped. Matthew, I understand the argument, a bird in the hand and all the rest of it, but I do not think this treaty is the right approach. But I respect your view. Absolutely and totally. Warren is a new caller from Oldham. Warren, does this look like Brexit?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I might surprise you slightly, though, Nigel. I'd like you to push for a second referendum.
Uh-huh.
The reason being, the first referendum was a binary choice of leave and remain, and we voted to leave.
Yes.
But surely the second referendum now should be whether we have the Prime Minister's deal or a clean break Brexit.
Yes, I do understand the logic of that, Warren. I really do. I suspect that in Parliament, in terms of support levels, it would be rather low, though.
But the big argument for Remainers is that people didn't know what they were voting for, and that is taken off their argument table. From a legal standpoint, we've had one referendum, and the second one will be building on it rather than ignoring it.
Yes, it would. Warren, I do understand what you're saying. And if there had to be a second referendum, it should be on how we leave. I think that's absolutely right. However, what Jeremy Corbyn is three-line whipping Labour MPs to vote for on Saturday, and I've no doubt the Lib Dems and the SNP will be there joining him, is a referendum of a choice of remain against this treaty. That's what they're going to try and pass on Saturday, Warren. I hope to goodness they don't do it, because in a sense that would just traduce our democracy by not giving us a credible leave option.
I absolutely agree. I don't think for 1 minute that Boris has got the numbers to get through on Saturday, and I fear the worst.
Yes. Well, if this doesn't get through, then the referendum on this won't get through, but then you may get a Parliament pushing for a different kind of second referendum. That is not impossible. Warren, I have to say, for dedicated leavers, this is a bit of a bleak day, I have to say that. Yeah. Very rarely I'm down in political terms, but I am today. Warren, thank you for your point of view, if only. Stephen is a new caller from Yarm up on Teesside. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Nigel. I've been listening, and I may be repeating something that somebody said literally probably 2 calls ago. But my view is that it's all about how we feel about Europe in general, about how much we want a free trade deal with them. Because there is no way on earth where they're going to give us a free trade deal if we did not have tax alignment and also giving up on the fisheries. I cannot see anybody who would have been able to negotiate a free trade deal with them not giving that to them.
Well, Canada did.
Sorry, go on.
Canada did. Canada has a free trade deal with the European Union without having to have open borders, without having to accept all of single market legislation, without having to give any of their fisheries away. So why can't we do that?
Right. The only thing is they don't have the financial services, some of the other industries, though, do they? The Canada deal. And I'm thinking that given that's the biggest industry, one of the biggest industries of the UK, surely that would come in as a substitute for the fisheries and potentially tax alignment, do you think?
Well, we would look at equivalence on financial services, Stephen, and you're right. Free trade agreements often are just on hard goods, and services can be very different. That's true.
Yeah.
However, I would say on financial services that in terms of the capital markets, without the London market, a lot of Europe would struggle to get the kind of short-term money it needs. But hey, that'll be up for negotiation. Stephen, look, I understand what Barnier is doing. I know the big fear here in Brussels. They don't want us to be a competitor. Angela Merkel said that last week, and that's what Boris has agreed to. And that just raises in my head, Stephen, the question: if we're not making our own laws in vast areas of our national and commercial life, is this Brexit?
You're right. It appears as if it's not what was promised. The only thing I think, though, is if, for those who really wanted it, Brexit, at some point, somewhere, there was going to be a compromise, something. And I think 100% purity was never going to be achievable. So that's why I say that
No,
Yeah.
I do understand that, Stephen. I do understand that. I genuinely do. But this is, no. There are way too many compromises here for me. Stephen, thank you for your thoughts. This is the Nigel Farage Show at 6:31. Time for the news with Lisa Aziz.
Boris Johnson has told a news conference in Brussels this evening he is very confident MPs will back his new Brexit deal, despite the DUP and other opposition parties ruling out their support in a vote at the weekend.
As they see it, a deal, a new treaty that Boris Johnson has agreed to. And if they're happy, I start to get a little bit suspicious. Earlier on today, we spoke to Philip Lamberts, Belgium Green MEP, member of the European Parliament Brexit Steering Group, and a very, very committed Euro-federalist, but a very reasonable, decent person to deal with and speak to. And we began by asking him, what did he make of today's agreement?
No, it was not true, but actually we went back to the first version of the withdrawal agreement. So it's not that we changed a lot fundamentally. And actually, the first version, that is a backstop limited to Northern Ireland, is what we wanted in the first place. Now, to be honest, there's been some adaptations to that version of the backstop, but I would say that fundamentally we are back to a situation where we limit the need for alignment to where it is actually needed, and that is Northern Ireland. So as to avoid the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. But don't forget that it was at the British request that we expanded the backstop to the entire United Kingdom.
Which is very interesting.
Now, if the British government says, okay, we are more comfortable with an option which basically limits the alignment to Northern Ireland, fine by us.
Now, actually, what Lambert says there is perfectly fair, because the backstop, the concept, was presented to Theresa May for Northern Ireland only. And she said, we can't possibly have that. We can't have a part of the UK being treated separately from the rest of the UK. And that was why then the backstop potentially could have applied to the whole of the UK, keeping us trapped inside the customs union forever. And that was the thing that Boris Johnson wanted to get changed. And that is his biggest achievement with this. That's why I say parts of this are better than they were before. So he makes a very, very good point there. But equally, you know, Boris Johnson spoke at the DUP annual conference last year and said no Conservative British Prime Minister would ever put a border down the Irish Sea separating Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom, and that is what he's done. We also asked Philip Lamberts, you know, how he actually really felt about us leaving, and whether perhaps he thought another referendum might be a good idea.
That's their decision. It really depends on what they want. Because, well, of course, a negotiated settlement is better than a non-negotiated Brexit, but Remain is even better. And so if people believe that there should be a last attempt at keeping the United Kingdom inside, then what they might decide to do is to say, okay, we may agree with the withdrawal agreement under condition that this be confirmed by a popular vote, and that is by referendum. That would be, as far as I am concerned, a sensible attitude.
And Mr. Juncker's tone on saying, oh no, there'll be no extension, if Parliament votes to have a referendum on this withdrawal treaty, he'll be all for an extension so that we can do it in that period of time. Is this Brexit? Sue says to me, nope, it's not Brexit in any shape or form. We've been sold down the river. Paul says to me, accept it. Don't nitpick on this deal. You're pathetic. Accept it. Come on, man. No, I can't, Paul, because it's not Brexit. All this taking back control of our laws, our money, our borders. Well, laws I've dealt with. Money? Well, 39 billion is what we know so far. I promise you, it'll be much, much higher than that by the time this next set of negotiations is over. And borders, well, I don't see anything in this document that indicates to me that freedom of movement is coming to an end. Nothing. Some slight changes of language, but I don't think it means very much at all. And you can bet your life that one of the conditions that Monsieur Barnier puts on a future trade agreement is continued free movement of people. And you realise, actually, all the phrases that Boris Johnson campaigned on, he's turned his back on today. I'm sorry. This is Theresa May's awful treaty that has been reheated. It is 95% the same thing as that rejected 3 times by the House of Commons. Edward is a new caller from Oxford. Good evening, Edward.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
Well, yeah, I've had better days.
Oh dear. Well, I mean, I'm a Leaver like you. I'm a big admirer of yourself. I voted for the Brexit Party in the European elections. because I wanted to use that as my sort of second referendum that they keep on talking about, or the people's vote that they keep on wanting to keep on talking about. But I'm just really sick and tired of this discourse. I just want it over and done with. I think it sorts out the backstop. It adds an element of democracy, and I just think the one thing that's really killing this country at the moment is indecision. We need to know how we're moving forward, and I think this just gives a reasonable opportunity to move forward. It's built consensus around this country, and that's what politics is all about. It's not perfect for everyone. We just need to move on and agree this.
Well, listen, I absolutely, Edward, the backstop has gone, all right? And that is a good thing for the rest of the United Kingdom, but it hasn't turned out to be a very good thing for Northern Ireland. Now, in theory, economically, if they're part of both blocks, they could get inward investment and lots of manufacturing going on. The problem is what happens when being part of our customs territory comes into conflict with being part of a single market. Who judges? Well, of course, the European Court of Justice. So I don't think even economically it'll be that great for them, and constitutionally puts them in the most horrible position. Do you know something? Do you know something, Edward? If this did get Brexit done, right? If this really was the end of it, and we could move on and end the uncertainty, I'd be with you. I'd say, all right, I tell you what, I don't love it, but let's just do it.
Glad you agree.
But what I know, absolutely 100%, is this does not get Brexit done. We've done the easy bit. And by the way, Monsieur Barnier has been promoted, and he's now in charge of the next phase of the negotiation. So we've got years more of Barnier. And I'm afraid, I just think in this next phase, they'll be making laws over large parts of our national life. We'll have no say over it whatsoever. I think they can do things to us.
We're always going to have a close relationship with the Europe. Well, I'd say Europe. I don't want to say the European Union because I detest that.
But do we have to have? Do we? Fine. But the big thing today was the big push from Barnier on regulatory alignment, including taxation, and that seems to me to be a surrender.
Okay. Well, do you think that if this deal is approved, that it would kill the likes of Corbyn and the Liberal anti-Democrats? Do you think it would kill that off, that whole argument, and that Boris would have a majority? I think that's the greatest threat. You speak to all sorts of asset managers and etc. So they don't. I mean, no deal Brexit would be bad, but they really fear Corbyn, and I think that would be a really good chance to kill him off.
I agree with that. I think actually Mr. Corbyn's done a very good job at killing himself off, and there is a big split on the left between him and the Liberal Democrats. Edward, I love your point of view. I love your positivity. I wish it was true. I'm afraid it's not, but I thank you very much indeed for the call. Wayne is a new caller from Moira in Northern Ireland. Wayne, lots of talk about Northern Ireland today. How do you feel?
Hi, Nigel. Firstly, great show.
Thank you.
I'm behind the DUP. The EU want to have the border and the RSC treated different. And any person saying to accept it, like 2 or 3 of your last callers have said, doesn't believe in the union because it's unstrengthening it. And having voted leave, I feel now it's best for us to remain just for order to strengthen the union, unless it's a no deal, which I don't think is going to get through Parliament. So I'm left in limbo.
Yeah, I do understand that, Wayne. And of course, as far as the union's concerned, this isn't just putting a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, because you're staying fully part of single market rules, fully part. Yeah. Why wouldn't Scotland ask for the same thing?
Exactly.
Or the Scottish nationalists ask for the same thing. And so, yeah, I do think this deal, as Boris likes to call it, or treaty as I prefer, potentially does huge damage to the union. So did you, just to confirm this, Wayne, did you vote leave in the referendum?
Yes, I did, yeah.
And yet you'd now rather remain than accept what's been put forward today?
Yes, for definite. There's also, they talked about looking to protect the Good Friday Agreement. Now they're saying there's going to be no veto, which again contradicts the Good Friday Agreement. And I just think it's too much.
Well, yes. I mean, this consent thing, Wayne, that they put in place for Stormont, basically says that Stormont can vote for it and can renew it for 4 years or 8 years, the arrangements that... but they can vote against it, and then Monsieur Barnier said, if they vote against it, there'll be a 2-year cooling-off period. So even if you want to vote against it, it's not going to work. So
like I said,
anyway,
the way Stormont is at the moment, it's not even going, so it'll be delayed for the 48 years. So all it takes is Sinn Féin not to turn up, brings down Stormont, and we're stuck here.
Wayne, not a great day for Northern Ireland. Potentially economically some good ideas, but constitutionally awful. Wayne, thank you. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It is now 6:46. Time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz.
The European Council President Donald Tusk has confirmed EU leaders meeting in Brussels have now approved the new Brexit deal, saying it seems we are in the final stretch. Boris Johnson says he is very confident that when MPs study his...
that there's an agreement and the incursion into northern Syria will cease, allowing Kurdish fighters time to withdraw. Donald Trump, who's been in a lot of trouble on this question, tweets out, great news from Turkey, news conference shortly with the Vice President and Secretary of State Pompeo. Thank you to President Erdogan. Millions of lives will be saved. Might be egging it a bit there, President Trump, but I think good news after what's been a pretty horrible few days in Syria. So back to Boris Ebullient. It is a great new deal. No, it isn't. It's not great. It's certainly not new. We've seen it all before. And it's not even a deal. It's a treaty. I think it's horrible. I think it'll lead to years of acrimony. I don't think that it is Brexit. Anne says, Nigel, I'm fuming and depressed as again we have been betrayed. Gaynor says, my fear is that Article 50 could be revoked and Brexit lost forever if we don't accept the deal. Gaynor, even this Parliament is not simply going to revoke Article 50, whatever you may think of them. I know the Liberal Democrats talk about this, but that is of course, conditional on them winning the next general election, which is pretty unlikely. Graham from Bristol says, I don't think this is a bleak day for Brexiteers. This deal will surely fail on Saturday. If Boris is good to his word, then we'll be leaving with no deal on the 31st. Graham, if we do, I'll be over the moon. I don't see it happening. But if this does fail in the House of Commons, and it leads to a general election at some point before too long, it does actually give Boris Johnson the possibility of pressing the reset button, of getting away from this treaty and making a fresh start. And that, I think, right now, to me, is the best possible outcome. Let's go to Stirling in central Scotland and speak to Tim. Tim, good evening to you.
Nigel, I can tell why you're angry. It's because you've been beaten. And I think you stumped on this one. Basically, I supported you the whole way, but there's no route anymore. I agree with you that we'd had a much better negotiating position if we'd have left, and then we'd have all the cards to play to get a better deal. I've always thought that the no deal would be the best option, but there's no route to it now. If you think Boris is going to go to a general election with a no deal manifesto, that isn't going to happen now. It'll be this deal. Labour, they're going to go into a general election if it's called with a referendum call. And your party, which I would have supported, is they're just not going to have the numbers. All it's going to do is split the vote of anyone
whose vote. Whose vote? Whose vote will it split?
People like me who. I'm sorry?
I said, whose vote will it split? The Labour Party or the Tory Party, or both?
It would potentially. I don't think it will achieve anything. I think the only thing that will happen is that if the Conservatives might not get a majority, we would be back exactly where we are now. I think that.
All right. No, Tim. I take your points. Let me just say this to you.
But this deal isn't 95% the same. That's not accurate, because you're saying that this deal is 95% the same.
The withdrawal agreement
Nigel is not. It's like having a cake, right, laced with poison. Okay, that's what the other deal was. The other deal was.
Tim, the withdrawal agreement is 95% the same. The political declaration is different in many other ways. But this is Mrs. May's trick. No, Tim, you may be right. Okay, I'm accepting you may be right. It may well be. The country says, right, we've got a deal. Hooray! And it may well be this is incredibly popular. And if it is, Boris Johnson, and it doesn't get through Parliament, Boris Johnson would run in a general election on this ticket. I get that, all right? However...
He's going to. That's what's going to happen.
Well, hang on. don't forget, Mrs May's deal, straight treaty, was massively unpopular with the country, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility that actually public opinion will say, do you know what, we don't like this.
Nigel, it was the backstop. That was the thing. This deal, okay, we were
what about the rest
in a
of
lot
it?
Ways for another few years, but the thing is, there was no way out before. That is now gone. That's massive. That's what I'm saying. Is in 95% of it might be the same in text, but the other deal was it had that poison kicker in it. It might have only been 5% poison, but it was always going to get us.
No,
in the
okay.
end,
Well, that has gone,
it's
Tim.
like a completely different deal. Now the backstop's gone. It is a completely different deal because we'll have a lot more leverage now. We might not.
But it's been replaced. It's been replaced. Look, I've said this already. Getting rid of the backstop was what Boris wanted to do. Making sure that the rest of the UK can't be stuck inside a customs union. That is the achievement here. That's the bit that's better. The problem, Tim, is the absolute insistence today and the ramping up of the so-called level playing field, of regulatory alignment on everything, including tax. And that, I think, is the problem that says to me, that fisheries, other things that already, they've already shown their hands on these things. And that, to me, Tim, says that we're headed in to years of acrimony. That's my problem.
I can see your point of view, Nigel, but I think you're being deluded if you think there's any route to a no-deal Brexit now. It's over. And what we need to do now is move on.
Well, I tell you what, if the country doesn't like what Boris has agreed, and he does fight an election, he may well say, do you know what, actually we're going down a different route. We'll see. You may be right, Tim. I don't know. Depends how the public take to this. But thank you for your call. I've quickly got time. Stephanie, a new caller from Callington in Cornwall. Stephanie, good evening.
Hello, Nigel.
Hi there. Sorry, time is short, Stephanie, but please tell me, is this Brexit?
It's not, and I couldn't be more cross. I feel really let down by politics, and we definitely have to change it for good. We have to keep up the fight. The question I wanted to ask you was, is there any way that we can take a judicial review into this deal? Because it seems to me that it flies in the face of our commitments under the Good Friday Agreement. And given that the EU are supposed to be wanting to honour the Good Friday Agreement, and it seems to me they've just completely trashed.
Stephanie, I'll tell you what I'll do.
Consent.
I'll tell you what I'll do, Stephanie, okay? Believe it or not, listeners, I'm going to be back tomorrow. Yes, I'm here on Friday at 6 o'clock, from 6 till 7, because there's so much to talk about with these issues ahead of this massive parliamentary couple of votes on Saturday. And what I'm going to do, Stephanie, is I'm going to ring David Trimble, who was very much one of the architects of the Good Friday Agreement, and I'm going to try and get him on tomorrow to answer that very question for you, Stephanie, okay? Because everyone talks about the Good Friday Agreement being broken, but actually, I wonder in terms of consent, whether what's been done today is consistent. I rather doubt it is. Stephanie, all of you, thank you very much indeed. I don't believe it's Brexit, but hey, let's see what Parliament decides on Saturday. So, yep, I'll be back in London tomorrow for an extra show at 6. At 10 tonight is Tom Swarbrick. Up next, it's Ian Dale.
Nigel, thank you very much indeed. Well, they said that they would not reopen the withdrawal agreement. They did. They said they'd never alter or abandon the backstop. They did. They said they wouldn't give up on regulatory alignment.